Hi, good evening. You are rapping with Sister Phoenix, Recipes of Resurrection. And I'm going to have a little bit of a hoarse voice tonight because I'm coming to you from my sister's house in Normandy on family vacation. And it's been a wonderful week of beach time with all the kiddos and a lot of sunshine and a lot of wind and a lot of sand. So I've got a little bit of a hoarse voice, and you'll probably hear the family in the house getting ready for bed, the little one trying to fall asleep. So you might hear some crying as well and people coming in and out, but such is life. And I'm grateful to have that time with my family. But the reason why I'm coming on here tonight is to have a heart-to-heart to talk about the topic of religious shame and guilt in divorce. And I wanted to share my story with you as well. So, so my mom is French and my father is Thai. And growing up, they were actually evangelized by some American missionaries that had come to Bangkok, and they had been looking for something, a religion that was teaching love and peace and those kinds of things. Hi. They were like born again evangelical Christians as I was growing up. And they were really excited about that faith. So pretty much my whole world growing up was within the evangelical Christian bubble. And we grew up with missionary kids in Thailand and then moved to the States and attended many different churches, from Brethren to Protestant to kind of more on the charismatic side. All different denominations. And my mom had grown up Catholic. So because of that, she had really kind of strict ideas about how women were supposed to act, how marriage was supposed to be, pretty traditional. And because of that, I kind of grew up thinking that that's how everybody was. There was a lot of innocence around it, but there was also a lot of judgment included in that. And so I grew up being taught that men were there as helpmates to men. For example, Eve in the Garden of Eden, she was created out of Adam's rib to be a helpmate to Adam. And the greatest joy that she could have in her life, or the greatest joy that women could have in their lives, was to get married and have kids and serve their husband and serve their kids and be fulfilled in the way that women are fulfilled. I was also taught the purity doctrines growing up. So, about remaining a virgin until you're married. One particular quote that stood out in my mind at that time, and I thought was really true, even though it was I thought it was tragically true, that the most precious gift that you could give your future husband is your virginity, to present yourself to him pure and untouched and unscathed, much like the flower in Jane the Virgin that had not been yet trampled upon. I don't know if you've seen that series, but my family was pretty into it. Not me so much, but that was the premise, was that she had to remain a virgin. And these ideas were really insidious. So I grew up really like covering up, not wanting to wear anything that would draw attention to my body, would reveal myself as having any sexual desires or urges, because that was like a no-go for women. Women were not sexual, and men were naturally very sexual, but that they had to conquer it and suppress it in order to be civilized, holy, godly men. And but it was natural for them to, want to sin. And anyway, so I grew up really having just a horrible teachings about sexuality, about relationships, about how they function. Nothing so much about how to truly nurture one another. I was taught a lot about service, but not support, not nurture in those terms. And I was taught when people had marital troubles that they are supposed to pray for one another, especially the women with, husbands who were abusive or situations where they wanted to leave. They were meant to stay and pray for their husbands in order to keep the marriage together. So these were the ways that I was taught, and it was incredibly difficult to kind of live up to the expectation of someone that was not human, not natural in that sense, that was denying their nature, denying the way that we are created in order to suppress ourselves and force ourselves into an image of piety or an image of holiness that somehow the church teachers had inserted in. But regardless, I wanted to do things right. I wanted to make sure I crossed my T's and dotted my I's, and that I was being good. I was being a good girl and a holy girl and doing things the right way. So I got married young, which is what you do when you're taught the purity doctrine. You get married young. But I got married when I was 24. And purity doctrine being number one top reason why I got married, first of all. But, I was fully expecting myself to be very fulfilled as a wife and as a mother. And so it was really hard on me when I had this kind of a spiritual revelation, a spiritual coming to, and figured out that I was really unhappy in that situation, that I was not happy being the helpmate or the person that was serving, the person that was praying for her husband, while, he was meant to be my leader, head of household. So I was, because of church teachings, I was letting him lead me, but he wasn't a leader in the sense that he wasn't more mature than me. He wasn't more financially stable than me. He wasn't more spiritually evolved than me. All of those things that you might see as being leadership material, potentially, someone having vision, someone having clarity, someone having goals, someone caring for and serving others. Those leadership qualities were just not there. But because I had my teaching that I was meant to have him be the head of the household and me being in the role of service, it was a recipe for disaster, I would say. But also I was really miserable because I had sacrificed, my own desires, my own dreams, my own vision, even my own just basic desires of who I was as a human being, my own base value, my own sense of self-worth, having dreams, having goals. I sacrificed that in order to serve the family and to serve him, and found that, and the church, I was serving a lot in the church. So I found that those weren't as fulfilling as people had promised them to be. And in fact, I felt my life slipping away, myself withering down to only a fraction of the passionate person that I had been before getting married. And, that I wasn't able to progress. In fact, I was regressing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of those things. But, I took the Bible very seriously. I took my church teachings very seriously. So I was somebody who attended church multiple times a week. I was at one point church secretary. I was worship leader. At one point, I even gave the Sunday sermon. And I attended 3 different Bible colleges, one of which I went back and studied things like eschatology and apologetics, and also went back to translate the original Hebrew and Greek, Old Testament and New Testament of the Bible to find more accurate translations, or to be able to compare the different biblical translations. So this is something that I put a lot of investment into. And on one hand, I'm very glad that I did, because it taught me so much about my own spirit, about introspection, about my own inner Holy Spirit, my intuition, my connection, my direct connection. So that was a really, really precious lesson for me to be able to feel into that and really think deeply into that, where I fit into this life. Like, what is this life about? You know, my spirituality was so important to me, just absolute number one priority. You know, I wanted to be a missionary. I wanted to make this my whole life center, my whole life calling. And so when I was divorcing and when I was pregnant with my second child, just in the beginnings of wanting to separate, I had, you know, a spiritual crisis, a moment of, hey, why isn't everything that I've been taught and everything that I was promised working out? And that was a moment of true spiritual awakening for me, in the sense of rebirth. You know, when you talk about being born again, that was my rebirth in being born again, was to be able to separate my own spiritual life and my own spiritual progress from the things that I had been taught in the past by the church, by different churches, by different teachers, being able to decide what in the Bible was the correct path for me, what I needed to take literally, what I did not need to take literally, and how I can follow direct guidance. So that was a pivotal, very difficult, incredibly difficult moment for me. Maybe the hardest part, the dark night of the soul, as they say, that comes before rebirth, is what many of us go through when we're divorcing. We have that dark night of the soul moment, rock bottom, when everything is falling apart, when life doesn't make sense anymore. You feel disconnected, like you're in the middle of a tornado or you're in the middle of a washing machine. And that to me was hugely tied in with my spiritual life and with the way that I was brought up in the evangelical church. So in the process of divorce and in making my decision to separate from my husband, even though my marriage didn't fit into one of the biblical reasons to divorce, which was, I was taught there are two reasons to divorce in the church. Number one is infidelity. And number two is if your spouse is an unbeliever and wants to leave, you can let them leave. Those were the only two reasons. So that doesn't include emotional abuse. That doesn't include financial abuse. That doesn't include sexual abuse, physical abuse. That doesn't include if your spouse is just not a spouse, just not a partner to you, not a support base to you, or perhaps even worse, a leech on your life and draining you. All those reasons were not valid reasons according to the churches that I grew up in. So for me, it was a certain act of rebellion, or maybe courage, to say, you know what, I'm going to separate anyways, even if it doesn't match one of these two check boxes, I'm going to separate anyways. And the number one deciding factor in that, the one thing keeping me in my marriage was, for so long, was wanting to abide by the teachings of the Bible, abide by the teachings of the church, and to not lose my sense of goodness, my sense of rightness, that I was doing the right thing, making the right choices, living life the right way. So that was, my biggest challenge. And it took me several years to make the decision. And of course, I spoke to my ex-husband about it many times with, warnings about how I felt and what I was thinking about and all those things. But really, the decision was internal. And the decision was between me and God, or me and spirit, my spiritual life, the most important thing in my life. And later on, after I had this spiritual rebirthing experience, and I was able to kind of step back from what I had been taught growing up and take a step back, seeing it as an adult, as a free woman, someone who, was able to kind of wipe the slate clean and come back and take a look at it with fresh eyes. And what I saw was absolutely shocking. the things that I had been taught that weren't at all true, the guilt that I had been suffering with, the shame that I had been suffering with, they were not true. They were illusion. They were facade. They were false teaching. They were false doctrine. They were made up. So much of this. And so because of this, I wanted to create a course entitled No More Religious Shame, even though I have to admit I'm not totally sold on that title. But whatever the title may be, it's just about the guilt and shame that we suffer in many Abrahamic traditions when it comes to following biblical prescriptions or the interpretations of biblical prescriptions on marriage and on divorce and the expectations thereof. So I wanted to create a course on that, and I did, because I don't want anyone to feel like they have to stay in a marriage because of what they were taught in a church, especially an abusive marriage, especially in a marriage where you are pulling all the weight and carrying the other person, and the other person is not a partner, but a leech. I don't want anyone staying in a marriage where they are being emotionally trampled, put down, ignored, where their voice isn't heard, where their dreams are not important or heard. I don't want anyone staying in an abusive marriage physically, sexually, because they think it's wrong to leave or because they feel that divorce is a sin. The first myth that I'm going to debunk here is that divorce is not a sin. And the Bible doesn't teach that divorce is a sin. And I'm going to break that down for you because this is really important. The church, okay, I won't go into it too much. I could talk about this for hours, honestly. I love this topic because it will set you free. It will set so many people free, like it set me free. And it not only sets you free from the ability to ask for separation or ask for a divorce and not feel that shame and the guilt, or not feel like you're doing something wrong, like you're committing a sin, because you're not. But it will set you free from the way that dogma has a hold on us, because there is financial abuse, there's emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, there is spiritual abuse. And that's something that we really don't talk about enough. But spiritual abuse is when people use God, use religion, use faith as a weapon of manipulation and control over you. And it has done for many centuries. And in fact, not that far back. Surprisingly, if you look at history, not that far back. But we have been controlled into these certain family units or belief units in order to keep certain structures together. And most of all, in order to keep this family structure of the woman supporting the man so that the man can have all the financial pressure on him and can have the lead, and that the men in the church would be the church leaders and they would not be able to be questioned by the women. And the women hold a different kind of view, a different leadership view, as has been attested scientifically. So this is not at all anti-man, because I have male friends who have suffered the very same. They've stayed in terrible marriages, abusive marriages, because they didn't want to shirk their duty because of this heavy sense of responsibility, this heavy mantle of, I'm the head of the household, it's all on me, I have to take care of, the wife that I chose, even if she's abusive and blah, blah, blah. So it's heavy for both people. And you know what the outcome is not a real relationship for both. Because how can you connect with the other person if your goals and dreams don't matter? If the family structure and the leading and the submission matter over all, if the having children matters over all, if we're seeing each other in functional roles instead of allowing ourselves to be fully faceted humans with lots of different quirks and desires and capacities. And, everybody is so different. Everybody is their own mosaic. You can't be putting everyone in a tritone color wheel. It just doesn't work that way. So it destroys the ability to have a real deep, intimate relationship when we are threatened by anything that doesn't fit in quite to these prescriptions. So that's a tangent, but it's really important to me to have this truth out there, to have the teachings out there. So I use my education and my history in biblical study, going into the Old Testament, going into the New Testament, looking at the different verses, looking at the different translations, but also the historical context of why we've been taught a certain thing and why that certain thing isn't actually saying what we think it's saying. And in fact, it's really, really clearly not saying don't divorce. It's really, really clearly not saying divorce is a sin. It's definitely not saying stay in an abusive relationship and pray for your spouse. Definitely not. All these things that we've heard, the Bible is not saying, number one. But number two, looking at the historical context of what was going on at that time, looking at the context of today, and looking at the global arc of human civilization and development and family units and how those have worked, we see very clearly that the pressure that we put on ourselves to maintain these extremely specific roles doesn't actually make any sense when we're looking at the big picture of things. From beginning to end, the arc, that truth, if truth is true, it's true at the beginning, it's true at the end, it's true everywhere in between, upside, downside, however you look at it, whenever you look at it, it's true, right? It's not contextualized to this person or that time period or this, all these gymnastics that we can do to uphold certain traditional teachings. So I go into that, but I also go into, kind of the basics, like what are the myths surrounding divorce? I go into 15 myths surrounding divorce. I go into 12 truths surrounding divorce, specifically in the context of this Abrahamic religions. So Catholicism, Evangelical, Protestantism, even parts of Judaism, parts of Islam, any tradition, any religious tradition that is going back to these traditional teachings of the Old Testament. And then I also go into the New Testament, but they have this hold on us that is really tainted by church history, by specific church leaders and their interpretations, and their own special flair that they added onto teachings that had nothing to do with what they were saying. So, I go into that to separate our spirit out from our tradition and what we were taught, and not religious dogma, but just made up stuff, because we need to have a direct connection. It's about the direct connection. And when we allow other people to supersede our direct connection to Spirit, to God, to the Holy Spirit internally, our intuitive base, when we allow someone to gatekeep that, to hijack that, and to tell us that we are meant to be miserable in a marriage, or we are meant to be in service to someone who clearly doesn't appreciate it, or when we're meant to essentially pay for a bad decision for the rest of our lives. For example, when actually no, you can get divorced, start over, have a new marriage, have a new life, and be super happy. You can. And there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, this is the kicker. I'm going to teach you how the New Testament very clearly states that that's what's preferable. So all of these things are going to be in there. I'm going to teach about how spirit is deeply wounded and affected by religious abuse and that kind of false teaching and control, and how it affects us on a really deep level. I'm going to teach you why. I'm going to teach you how to unhook yourself from that, let go of those fears and triggers that are happening in your soul that are linked with what you were taught about your own faith, your own spirituality, and your connection to spirit. So I'm going to teach you those, and I'm going to have an appendix to go through all the different verses and the context of those verses and things for those of you who are really into biblical study and history and, you know, kind of the more academic nerdy types. Totally not necessary, but if that's something that you're into, that's going to be in there. So I'm giving a live class on this Wednesday. So it's going to be 9 p.m. my time in France, CET, which is going to be noon on the West Coast, PST, and it's going to be 3 p.m. on the East Coast. So put it in your calendars. I'm going to put the link down below for you to be able to sign up. And I fully expect that if you attend and, you know, this is something that is pulling on your heart, causing you pain, causing you sickness, darkness, heaviness, whatever that may be, from the guilt and shame around the idea of divorce and separation and around your faith and your religion, I fully expect that in attending, you will feel lighter, you will feel freer, you will feel justified and valued in your desires and in your inner knowing, because you know already what's right for you. So I'm going to put the link down below. And there's one thing that I want to show you in signing up. So when you click on the link, here, let me share the page to the screen. So when you click on the link, you're going to come on this sheet here where you can just sign up. And what I'm doing is you can sign up for $1, or actually in euros, it's going to be like €2.40. And then when you sign up, you attend the class. And once you're done attending the class right here, this is a little bit confusing because it says it's on a subscription, but it's not. It's only a 2-payment subscription. When you're done attending the class and you've decided that it was helpful to you and it's what you needed to set your spirit free, then you're charged another $46. So it's a total of $47 for the course. And the reason for this being that I don't want money to be an issue for anybody when it comes to accessing this class. And if you find it of value, of course, $47 is really not much to get free from the heaviness of religious shame. You should feel loved and valued when you are able to reclaim your life and really live your passion, your dreams, your gifts, and you know what your life was really meant for. I want you to feel liberated to do that without anything pulling you back or trailing you behind. So yeah, $47 is accessible for everybody, for you to be able to attend this class, and it's going to be a live class. Wednesday, again, 9 p.m. CET, noon PST, and 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to also write that down below. And if you can't make the live class, then you can have the recording of the class, and you can ask any questions that you want to as well. You can send them to me, and I will answer those questions for you on the live, even if you can't make it. So be sure to send me your questions. And then you'll be able to access the workbook as well that you'll get included in that price, and the 2-hour live class starting on Wednesday. So I leave you to sign up for that if that's speaking to you, and if that's something that's going to be beneficial to you. You can tell people who are suffering from this kind of, I want to say imprisonment, because it is. It's an imprisonment and manipulation and religious abuse. And if anyone you know is suffering in a bad marriage, or if they've already divorced and they're feeling that weight of the shame, tell them to take this class, because they're going to feel a heck of a lot better and be clear to live their purpose in life. So I leave you with that. And as always, if you have any questions, just ping me, but I'll see you there on Wednesday. And and sign up even if you can't make it. There will be the recording and the workbook for you. So good night, everybody. I'm off to bed. Bye.